You're sitting at home. Suddenly a knock on the front door. You go to see who it is, and there's two children standing on your front porch. They ask to come inside, but something's not right. And then all of a sudden you look at the children and you realize their eyes are completely black. No pupils, no irises, completely black. A feeling of absolute terror comes over you. You say they can't come in, they start getting aggressive. They mention they cannot come in unless you invite them. You shut the door and call the police, but by the time the police arrive, there's nothing there. Join us today on Speaking of Spirits as we talk about the black-eyed children. Thank you for joining us today on Black-Eyed Children. That is the topic we are talking about. The podcast is called Speaking of Spirits. But thank you for joining us today either way. We are talking today about the black-eyed children, an interesting phenomenon that has been going on. A lot of people say it first started back in the 1990s. That's when recordings of dealing with the black-eyed children started coming out, but there's actually been reports going back to the 1950s.
That's fascinating because I didn't find any reports that old. I did find the 90s, like 96 or something like that, report out of Texas.
Yeah. The first one did come out of Texas, and it was actually from a reporter down there. And that's what happened to him. He was in his car. And he was going in to pay a bill. This was back when we actually had to, in person go pay bills. And he pulled into a parking lot, and there was right next to a movie theater. And the sun was starting to go down. It was almost sunset, and he was using the light from the movie marquee to finish the paperwork that he was going to go drop off. And there was suddenly a knock on his window for his car. And he looked over, and there was two children standing there. He can give a pretty good description of the children to this day. But the children, one of them said, can you give us a ride? We want to go see a movie, but we need a ride. We left our money at home. Can you give us a ride to our mom's place? And he felt something wasn't quite right, so he started asking questions like, well, how far is it away? And they wouldn't give a specific answer. They weren't giving an address. They said, it's not that far. It'll be just a couple of minutes. And he felt something was weird. And then he noticed that these children had solid black eyes. There was no pupils. There was no nothing. And he was overcome with an incredible fight or flight experience, reaction. He kind of felt like something was quite off up until that point, but then when he noticed that. And after he noticed that, and he kind of started backing away, trying to find a way out, and the children started becoming very aggressive. They started knocking on the door. They started pounding on the door. They started saying, hey, let us in. We need in. And throughout the entire encounter, there was two children there. And throughout the entire encounter, the second one was pretty quiet, but the second one did mention, we can't get in unless you invite us.
That's creepy.
That is very creepy. Mm-hmm. That is very creepy. And
so you got to wonder, because you've heard of the vampire
yes.
lore, right, that they cannot come into your house unless they're invited.
Well, there's a few entities like that. There's a few entities that cannot cross unless they're invited.
Well, not werewolves.
Yes.
They can go anywhere, right?
They can.
Yeah,
yes.
that's true.
Because werewolves are cool.
Werewolves are cool. I'll give you that. I'm
Unless
just not
you just
into the
cracked
whole...
open a silver bullet.
Yeah, I just don't want the whole spine elongation thing going on every month. Okay, just saying. But yeah, this is really it's creepy. I have an acquaintance. She was actually one of our very first Facebook fans for our paranormal page. We had a long discussion about her encounter with black-eyed children. She lives somewhere in the Midwest, and she said, to this day, it still brings out chills and sweats when she thinks about it. That terrifying of an event.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, you know, the thing that kind of struck me when we were looking into it, it seems to be a fairly new American phenomena.
It started this first reporter, he was a reporter, so he wrote about it, and he wrote about it online. So that was the first time that it really kind of became public. And there have been multiple reports since then. But like I said, there have actually been reports going back to the 1950s. Now, this also comes a point where interesting thing about the entire world of the paranormal is just within my lifetime, there's been a huge shift. When I was young, you didn't talk about anything in the paranormal. You didn't talk about experiences. You didn't talk about black-eyed children. You didn't talk about ghosts. You didn't mention seeing UFOs. And the culture has been very open lately, and that's just been within my lifetime there has been that shift.
Could that have something to do with the faith you were brought up in?
I don't think it was so much the faith. I really think this might be kind of a
just a
sub-effect of the internet.
Yeah, that could be. I know it's completely different in my case with growing up with like weird mom. It was on the table, open discussion in our house because it was just such a bonkers place to live.
Yeah.
You know, so
I'm talking about in general because in general
True.
we didn't used to see shows about the paranormal.
Didn't. I mean, In Search Of was the best.
Oh yeah.
You know, because it would touch on paranormal stuff all the time.
But even that was kind of hidden.
Yeah.
You know, they kind of toned that down a little bit. They kind of really didn't promote that show. They didn't talk about it. They just kind of put it on, didn't really. And you sure didn't talk about any UFO sightings or anything like that back then. And if you ever did hear a story, particularly about a UFO, they portrayed the people telling the story as very uneducated.
Yeah.
Very, backwoods.
3 whole teeth left.
Yeah, 3 teeth left, and just not very educated, not very bright, not very knowledgeable of the ways of the world, and these are the people that saw UFOs.
Yeah. So my perspective is I've been a dad for almost 12 years now. Mm-hmm. Poor me.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
And you wouldn't even believe the type of questions that I get. And a lot of times I know the answer. And so I can give them an answer.
Mm-hmm.
But when it boils down to things that I don't have the answer for, I tend to go to Google. Because Google and I, we have an established relationship. And he knows I have lots of questions. So just think previous generation. So
right.
My dad, he didn't have that.
Nope.
So when you brought up paranormal or UFOs and he didn't have answers, what was he supposed to do? He didn't have the old pocket computer with Google.
Right.
So it was probably easier for him to just shut the question down.
True.
Not saying it's right, but
it
probably happened.
But then going back to the 1950s, there are some reports of it, but you sure didn't talk about anything like that.
Yeah.
No, one of the first alien abductions came from, I believe, around Lake Tahoe area, reported in the 1950s. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Interracial couple at the time was really frowned upon. I'm so glad that part of our existence is over. But they lost time, and it was an account of them losing time, like hours of time. And they remembered the white light coming down in the whole 9 yards. 1950s. Things weren't talked about at all. This came out years later. I mean, it was documented back then. Mm-hmm. But everything now is kind of on the table. You can talk about anything, which is nice. It's good, I think. or we
People
wouldn't
can
be
start
here.
podcasts.
I know, right?
I think a lot of times, though, when somebody comes out and tells a story, has their experience, it creates kind of a safe zone for other people.
Yeah.
Oh, I had something very similar happen,
Mm-hmm.
to me, and to go through there. But I was watching a video where I just remember his first name, Brian. He was the guy who originally had the first, well, I don't want to say the first encounter, but maybe the first recorded encounter in modern history and put it on the internet. He actually has got absolutely nothing from this. In fact, he was a reporter at the time, so of course his way of dealing
on the
with
black-eyed children.
Yes, he was a reporter, so he's a journalist. So his way of dealing with things is to write them out.
Brian
so
Bethel.
He wrote a story. Yes, Brian
From
Bethel.
Abilene, Texas.
Yep, in Abilene. And he absolutely, the video I saw says that he probably has lost jobs. That has probably hurt him.
I can
to
imagine.
Come out and tell this story.
Well, first off, Abilene, Texas, I lived really close to Abilene for a few years, like really close. And it's a very Baptist,
Okay.
I mean, it's Baptist South, right, back down there. And it's a really, really small community. I mean, it's grown a lot over the years, but it's really a small community. And I can imagine the harassment that this guy went through by coming forward with this story.
Yeah. See, now that's one of the things that I look at is when somebody comes out with a story of the paranormal or is telling me an experience they had. That's one of the things I look at is, are they gaining from this? Mm-hmm. And he has actually lost a lot. And there's some people who you can't even buy them. I'm not saying Brian is this. I'm just saying in general, I've heard stories that when people have stories of the paranormal, you can't even buy them a cup of coffee and have them tell their story.
Yeah.
Because they put a conscious, intentional effort into saying they will never get anything from this. That gives it a lot of credibility.
Yeah.
To me, that's one thing that just kind of really jumps out at me.
There's a report, I believe it's from England, Mark Hoover writes about it, called The Black-Eyed Children of the Cannock Chase. For many years, people have claimed to have encountered ghostly children without eyes in this town. Some claim they are aliens, while others have claimed they are ghosts of murdered children. Cannock Chase is a place where people have claimed to see a ghostly girl walking the trails. Those who have had the who are unfortunate enough to see her claim she has no eyes. She has two dark orbs that replace her eyes. Some people believe that she's the spirit of a murdered young girl in that area. But either way, and that's the thing about the lady that I've spoken to who has had a first-hand encounter with this. She also thinks they're aliens. She does not believe that they're human in any respect. She believes they're aliens, without a doubt. She said it was absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that is constantly reported in sightings of the black-eyed children is the people that have this have got a very strong sense of fear that something is not right. There's just an energy that comes around these children and we assume they're children. They look like children. And another aspect of this is that they look like children, so people assume they're children, but yet when they speak, they tend to come across as much more mature than children.
There's a lot of things in the paranormal world that mimic children.
True.
And they're not good.
Yeah, they're usually not friendlies.
No. People, they do believe, they have that feeling of unease. Nothing about the children other than their eyes would suggest that they're anything but a child, like Mark said. But but when they start speaking and their eyes, that those two things together are immediately tell people this isn't a child in front of me.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way they speak, the way they present themselves is much more advanced than just a child. So that comes out. And I just want to take a few minutes here and go over some of the similarities in all of the reports that I have heard or read dealing with the black-eyed children is that they usually show up in groups of one or two, small groups. They tend to be, some of the reports I've seen have been they've been on the side of the road, just out in the middle of nowhere, but they also tend to be in the middle of urban areas too. They will tend to show up. I've also heard them knocking on front doors. People will be in their house, but one of the things that is consistent is that they try to enter something, whether the person experiencing this is in their vehicle or in their home. The children try to enter whatever it is to get inside with the adult, and they usually try to come up with a story that they need to use. Well, like in Brian's case, they need a ride somewhere. If they come to the front door, they will say they used to say they need to use the phone, but I haven't heard of any of those reports now that everybody has their own cell phones. Or they'll say they need to use the restroom or something.
Yeah.
And they do tend to, if you start getting, have an encounter with the black-eyed children, if you start to say no or pull away, they do become aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
That is one thing that has come across and I have never heard a story of what happens if somebody lets them in.
No. Well, yeah.
So I don't know if anybody ever has, and they've just never mentioned the story, or if they've never been heard from again. I don't know. But
they're also commonly described as having kind of dated clothing on, like not from your time frame. So
it'd be rough right now. I was driving the other day, and I'm a 90s guy myself. Grew up in the 90s. And all of a sudden this girl walked by, and she had the holey pants, the flannel, the everything.
Yeah.
Like it was like I was in 1997. Like, what's happening here?
Does she have black eyes?
Probably.
So some of the people also claim that, and I don't know how they would know this unless the children were bare feet, but that they had talons for feet or other demonic attributes. But most sightings are of seemingly normal children.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, going back to the alien aspect of this, it's kind of amazing to me. I had a friend, Matt. He lived in my driveway for about a year and a half, lucky guy. And we go out and look at the stars and just talk about things. And it's amazing some of the things we'd see at night. And we'd explain it away or in just complete denial about it. Mm-hmm. Because I guess that's the mindset you have to have. Mm-hmm. But it's amazing how we have to explain things away. And with the kids with the dark eyes and the alien connection, how many people have just explained themselves away?
Right.
Just a couple weird kids.
Mm-hmm. So, in Norwich, England, a gentleman named Craig was walking down the street when two figures approached him. The children looked out of place. He continued walking down the street. The kids approached him. They appeared to be young. One was about 13, the other was about 9. He was from the United States, this gentleman, and he was studying abroad. And he said he was at a friend's house having a few drinks, and then he decided to go home, and he came across these two kids, and they asked if he could take them somewhere. I mean, he's on foot, he's walking, and he said it was odd because he was passing by a graveyard when this happened. And so he agreed to take the kids where they wanted to go, and he escorted the kids towards the cemetery. He looked at them closer. The older boy's hair was jet black, the skin was porcelain white and veiny. And then he saw the eyes, and he said that they were dark as coal with no sign of white. He said it was like they had no souls or nothing inside them. That's got to be, you're all alone, you're on foot, you don't have any weapons on you, that's terrifying. So this is one event where they didn't ask to come in or didn't ask to get in your car. They asked to be escorted. So that's a kind of a change in behavior. So are they adapting to the society they're in?
Do we have a date on that one?
No.
Okay.
So that basically completely ruined my closing statement.
Oh, no.
Which, whatever. But they say that the eyes are the window to the soul.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I was going to close. There you go.
That was quick. So,
and Tim is done. Thank you for.
So it said this gentleman went into about a week later into a magic shop that was owned by a person who was Wiccan, and they got into this conversation, and she's the one, or he told her the story of these black-eyed children, and she said, "You're not imagining anything," and he apparently had not heard of these kids before, so I'm not sure what time frame this was, but kind of interesting. I mean, it's not just an American phenomenon.
No, but also then if it comes out then that she was Wiccan, that indicates fairly recently.
True. Yeah, that's true.
So is when that story came out. They could be changing. They could be adapting.
So interesting. Last night or this morning I wake up, and I get all the animals fed and I do all my stuff outside and I come back in and I make my coffee and I sit down and I flip open my phone. Not flip it. I don't have a flip phone anymore, although I keep threatening to go back to because I'm really disgusted with Verizon's fees. But anyway, so I open up my apps and I have an app that turns off my phone, all the sound, at a certain time, because I get calls, with the paranormal team, you get calls all night long, and a lot of them are hoaxes. I don't want to be disturbed, so it's a do not disturb app. Mm-hmm. So last night at 2:46, this is weird because we had already planned to do this podcast talking about black-eyed children, and I wish I would have saved them because I deleted them. There were 2 texts that happened at 2:46 a.m. this morning. It said, "We're outside your door, can we come in?" Really? And I'm searching through my texts trying to figure out if there's a way I can show you guys my deleted texts. And I don't see that there's a way to do it. It was 2 text messages. And I thought, and it was a phone number that I did not, so they're not there. There's a phone number I didn't recognize from an area code I didn't recognize. And I thought, my first thought was, well, the dogs didn't hear you and they'd surely, especially the new dog, there's no way anybody was outside my door. But I thought, and then we were starting to talk about this tonight, and I went, wait a minute, I had those texts. And I wonder if I can go on my Verizon app and actually see my deleted text to show you. I think that's bizarre.
I think there's a way we can do that.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that here in a minute. That's kind of cool, though.
Yeah, well,
I mean, it's kind of cool for me because I wasn't there, but...
well,
not
I mean,
outside my door.
It was at, 9 o'clock this morning with my coffee, so I'm okay with it. But, yeah, that was kind of creepy that I had that too. And it was 2 in succession. Like, we're outside your door. Can we come in? And I thought, well, what the heck?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to see if I can find it while we keep talking.
That's interesting. I've never heard him using technology before. So
dun, dun, dun.
Maybe things are. Now, that's also really interesting because I know Colleen just recently got a new dog that is like hyper protective.
Oh, God.
And I really think if there was something outside the door, that dog would have gone off.
Well, yeah, because she's super protective. And then I have the smaller dog who, the one day away from a bullet dog. Mm-hmm. He's really hyper vigilant with noise. So a lot of times I'm like, shut up, Fergus, because he's mm-hmm. and I mean he's not a little dog, but he's still. So between the two, one of the other would have heard something.
Well, yeah, but you got dogs and horses and
donkeys.
And
yeah, it's
goats.
Ridiculous.
Goats and yeah,
chickens.
Don't
forget the rooster.
And not Elvis. Nobody's forgetting Elvis. So, yeah, I just thought that was really weird. So,
That is very
while
weird.
we're talking about it, I'm going to try to log into Verizon
All
and find
right.
it.
Actually, I think you can do it from your text, too.
No, I couldn't find a way to get my deleted messages. Because it would have been right in... Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
And it was so weird because it was like 2:46 this morning, and obviously I didn't hear it because I have it on quiet mode.
Well, we've had an interesting day here. We've done a few podcasts and YouTube thingy with a fella that I should
Decon?
remember. Decon, that's his name.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like every time we've talked about having to have an invitation. Invite. There we go. And it seems to be the word of the day.
Mm-hmm.
That it has to be kind of a your will kind of a thing, not an our will kind of a thing. And it's interesting.
That is, and I've never found out why entities have to be invited in. That's something I've not worked out yet. So.
No, that is weird because most of the hauntings that we deal with, they're not invited. They're just there. So why do things that are trying to do you the greatest amount of harm need to be invited?
Yeah, that's something I've been trying to figure out, and I do not have an answer to that yet.
Well, if anybody out there has an answer, we would be very excited.
And I think things do mimic children because we assume children are safe.
Well, there's a protective instinct there,
we,
too.
We want to protect them, yep.
Yeah.
And, yeah. One of my past lives, I was a firefighter. And I was cool with every situation. Like, really. I could handle just about anything. Unless it involved a kid. And then everything was on fire. And I don't know, I guess I'm especially wired for that.
Sure.
But I think we all are. And so we're able to look over the initial idiosyncrasies or whatever it is just because it's a kid. And I'm sure there's lots of things out there that take advantage of that.
I'm sure there are. And that's true, yeah. Again, many lifetimes ago, I tested for and started with the Las Vegas Police Department.
Oh, boy.
And there was a lot of them down there that were the same way. You know, we could deal with rape, pillage, plunder, murder, mayhem, death, and destruction. But if it involved a child, that was kind of a whole new thing.
Yeah. Don't call Tim over on that one.
Yeah.
No, my mom was, a cop for many, many years and in dispatch, and the hardest calls were children. Anything that involved children. And sorry, folks, I'm still trying to pull up these messages. But anyway, back to this story. I don't know. The whole thought, if they were alien, would an alien necessarily invite you in? Because most abductions are just, you're abducted. You're.
That's what I'm trying to figure out what these things might be, because if they have to be invited in, I doubt they're alien. They're not ghosts, with ghosts being defined as somebody who was once humanoid. So they're not ghosts, because ghosts have got no clue of boundaries.
No.
Most of them just
walls or
go,
doors or anything else.
Yeah.
In and out. So, and I know there's some really dark entities that do have to have permission. And I'm not sure if this is a subcategory or another dark entity that requires permission to enter, but they're very interesting. There's, of all the reports of the black-eyed children, there are, like I said, a lot of similarities. One of the stories that I heard that jumped out at me was a lady and her mom were in the mall, and I can't remember where this was. I actually heard this story listening to the radio a couple of years ago, so a lot of the details have escaped me. But it jumped out at me because this particular woman was a school teacher, and her mom was a school teacher.
Yeah.
And there were two kids in the mall that were kind of like on the escalator behind them that were kind of being a little rambunctious. And her mom, being a school teacher for many years, was trying to get those kids back in line. And these ended up being black-eyed children. And it really upset both of these ladies. And both of them were school teachers. They were not afraid of children. They've been around children, and they knew how to do that. But this was something then that really jumped out at them. And along that, there's a lot of stories of the black-eyed children that, again, people have more to lose than to gain by coming out with these stories.
Yeah.
By telling their experiences.
Yep. Well, my wife's a teacher, and I've heard the teacher voice many times. And
I'm sure you have, yes.
it works for me, so it should work for all kids. And if those kids weren't minding, you knew something was wrong. Yeah, and then the other part of that is you definitely don't want the crazy word attached with yourself if you're going to be a teacher.
Yes.
Number one reason why I haven't gone into teaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of reasons I didn't go into teaching, but that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would definitely tend to lean that something awful weird happened to those two to put their careers on the line like that.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that I look for when people call up, when we get calls, people will call and talk to me about or tell me what's going on, is what kind of a reaction are they having while they're telling the story? In fact, we just had this happen last week on an investigation. We were doing an investigation and we were asking them what kind of activity had been going on. And it was a local business, and it was owned by a husband and wife team. And the husband asked us if it's okay if he tells us one story, and the wife said yes. And as he started telling the story, you could see her tense up.
Oh, boy.
She physically tensed up. That's not something you can act.
No.
Not very easily, anyway. So that's one of the things I look at. And, what kind of a reaction is this causing? Sometimes even years later.
Yeah.
Even years after the event happened. And the reports of black-eyed children seem to fall within that. This seems to be such a disturbing experience for people who have had it that even years later, it's got a very emotional component to it when people tell these stories of these interactions that they have had with these children. So, well, supposed children, we'll call them that.
Yeah. Quotations.
Yes. Air quotations around children. Yes.
Well, and that story leads back to the eyes, too. It's amazing what you can glean from a conversation just when you look in someone else's eyes. Mm-hmm. And if that person's eyes are black and you can't glean that information, I don't know how I'd handle that. I haven't had that experience. But it'd be something.
Yeah, I definitely think it would be spooky, and it's not something I hope I ever come across. I mean, a lot of paranormal stuff doesn't bother me, but this one would probably throw me.
Mm-hmm. Likewise.
I have to admit, this one might actually throw me too, just because I do like to look in people's eyes if I can get a chance to talk to them, because I do get a lot of information from that. Mm-hmm. And to not see eyes, to have something that is completely black like that, where you get zero information or feedback, that alone would be disturbing.
Yeah, it would hit totally differently.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if it was an eloquent child with eyes you can't read and they're weird looking.
And that's the thing, a lot of just about all the reports I've said, they look like children, but when they start to speak, they sound much older. Much more advanced in the way they look.
That whole trust your gut thing, right? I mean, so not black-eyed children related, but a couple of years ago I was selling something on Facebook. Like headboard, footboard, I think, right? And this person gets a hold of me on Messenger. I want to buy it. I said, great, we can meet tomorrow or whatever day, during the day, because it was like 8 p.m. Winter.
Yeah.
Dark.
Pitch black by 8
Pitch black.
p.m. Yes.
And he was real insistent. Well, my kids can come out right now. like, no, dude, I'll meet you during the day when my neighbor can come over, because nobody's coming to my house unless, they're invited. And really, really, really pushy to the point where I had to block this person on Facebook.
Wow.
Because it was almost like, it was I was uncomfortable with how much this push was going. So the first thing out of my mind, because I don't trust humans at all, is they're coming over here to case the joint and I'm going to be robbed. I mean, that's how how pushy and aggressive this was. And I can only imagine these kids standing at your door and being that pushy and that aggressive. And thank God they can't come in without being invited.
Yeah.
Because, oh my God, can you imagine? I mean, I don't trust anybody anyway. And I don't trust anybody. I mean, maybe if they're 8, I'd think about it. But I really don't trust people. And the kid's coming up to my car, getting that, nope, put it in drive and go. Just like this reporter did. Because, and then you could say, well, I'll call the cops for you and they can come give you a ride. I mean, and then leave, kind of thing. But you don't know what anybody's ulterior motive is anymore, because there's so much drugs out there and so much weirdness and chaos. But these kids, that's a whole level of fear that I don't want to experience. And not a whole lot spooks me.
Mm-hmm. Have to take my haunted gun out.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
I don't know if it'd even help in this case, but
You never know.
give it a shot. All right. Well, black-eyed children, that was our topic today. Very interesting. And a lot of people will say this was a recent phenomenon. I don't know how recent it is. I think it might go back quite a ways.
Sure could.
So be safe out there. Take care of yourself. Hey, if you're enjoying the podcast, let us know. Please go to whatever platform you listen to the podcast. Give us a 5-star review. That helps us know what we're doing, and that helps other people find the podcast. We would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us today. For myself, Mark, Colleen, and Tim, we will catch you on the next podcast. Thank you.
Ha 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 ha!